Good morning, Sunnyvale. Happy Friday. We're halfway through August already. Okay. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in just a second. We're running a few minutes late. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to my weekly virtual office hours. This week's early artwork is another one of our utility box art pieces of art. This is actually at the corner of Remington and Bernardo. And with all the weird weather that we've had and kind of the interesting sunsets, especially that we've had, I thought it was actually a perfect piece of art for this to start this week. But yeah, I continue just to visit the different artists and the utility box art program that we have around the city, and it's actually been fantastic to see how we continue to add that art. It's really great to meet the artists, hear their stories, and from that standpoint, how the city has actually encouraged them to expand their career as an artist. So it's been really good from that standpoint to get out there. And we've highlighted pretty much the all over the city the utility box art, and so really fantastic to see that continue. And the phase 2 is almost complete. There's 1 or 2 boxes that are still being wrapped up. But if you see an artist out there working on them, stop by, say hi. I've only heard positive things from residents that have talked to them and thanked them for adding art like this to our city. So adding a little color throughout our city has been fantastic. Let's go ahead and get started. Good morning. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Thank you for joining me again this week. It's been another busy week. This is the 173rd installment of my weekly virtual office hours. I hope everyone's doing well, enjoying your summer and our interesting sunsets and a little bit of the weird weather, the tropical weather. We've had a little bit of rain, but some spectacular sunsets throughout this week. We've now reached 1,250 days since the March 16, 2020 county health order started the shelter in place in an attempt to slow the spread of COVID-19. Over 3 years ago, I converted my weekly coffee shop office hours into this weekly live stream address. And thanks to everyone who continues to join me and giving me feedback. It's been great to hear from people that they appreciate hearing from the mayor each week, whether or not they're watching live or watching tape delayed. It's just good to give you some updates of what's happening in the city, tell you about some upcoming events, answer some of your questions, and just give you some general words of encouragement. So thank you for allowing me to continue to work for you and represent you. Most Fridays like today, I follow up our live stream sessions with in-person meetings on Bean Scene at Murphy Avenue. If you'd like to reserve a 15-minute or 30-minute time slot, just email me, and that's at council@larryklein.com, and we'll figure out a time slot. You can always see my calendar at larryklein.com. So I have my calendar there of when I'm actually going to be at the coffee shop and have my office hours in person. But it's actually really good from that standpoint that people can just drop by. If you got a quick question, 1 or 2 minute comment or question, you can always drop by and just pass that on. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about what's happened at the federal, state, county, and city level. 2 weekends ago, yeah, it's already been 2 weekends, visitors from our sister city, Izuka, Japan, were here. And we were in the process of celebrating our 10-year anniversary with Izuka being our sister city relationship. And, it's actually been a very successful relationship. I talked to the Japanese consul and deputy consul from Japan. And we have one of the best sister city relationships in California. We've over the last 10 years, we've sent 132 students to Japan, and 140 students from Japan have come to Sunnyvale. So it's actually really good. It was good to celebrate that 10-year anniversary, and ultimately see how it's progressed, and how it continues to grow, and looking for new ways to expand that relationship. Last Tuesday evening was a very long night from a council standpoint. We started at 5 p.m. and went to almost 1 a.m. the following morning. And we started with the Village Center Master Plan study session, kind of giving feedback on the village centers. And those are kind of major intersections around the city where there's mainly retail now, that we're looking to add housing, but not lose that retail component. And, what we can do to kind of maintain that, that walkability for the neighbors that are living in the surrounding communities, as well as adding, housing, much needed housing, and kind of making it walkable, walkable communities but having that retail there, having appropriate parking, all those sorts of things that make it a good walkable community. And then as far as the main meeting, Assemblymember Evan Lowe was there to talk about ACA 5, the Marriage Equality Act, and he also gave us $1.75 million. So he brought in a big check. Always good to get those big checks, but for Lakewood Elementary safe routes to school. So improving, biking and pedestrian visibility and kind of safety around Lakewood Elementary in the north of the city. So happy to see Assemblymember Lowe there. And then as far as the main meeting, we spent multiple hours considering the conversion of the part-time bike lanes on Homestead Road into full-time bike lanes. And so that had been decided by council back in 2015 to make them part-time. So they're bike lanes from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. During the weekdays, and all the other times in evenings and weekends it was parking. And a lot of people on both sides came out to speak. We finally decided from a council standpoint to make it permanent. But part of that would be do further evaluations on how we can basically do a road diet, kind of narrowing some of the lanes, and where we can do the restriping for the bike lanes, putting in actual bike buffer, so striping to make sure that there's even more safety for the bikers. And that allows some of the residents to have some time to reconfigure conceivably their driveways, to make sure that they have room to turn around and things of that nature, as they utilize the parking on site. And so for me, it's we heard from a lot of residents, parents and bike advocates, and students about the safety of biking to high school, elementary, middle school along that corridor. But there's also, for me, I went through multiple times during the time when it should have been bike only. And there were multiple locations along that corridor where there were cars parked. And, it was that sort of thing. It's trying to make sure that previous council made the decision to try to make it usable by both. And definitely the cars were, and even when I was biking through, having to go out into the street in order to get around the cars that were parked there when they shouldn't have been parked there. So yeah, it was not an easy decision, but I think it was important to hear from everybody, and council ultimately unanimously approved that conversion, along with the road diet and the potential bike buffer for the bike lanes. And then that same evening, we also heard a request concerning the downtown. So doing an addition to the downtown specific plan of adding about 200,000 square foot of additional office space, and then also increasing the allowable building height from 75 feet to 85 feet for a portion of those blocks. And so that was approved by council. So that needs to be studied. Nothing, no decision's been made, but that was approved by council to go off and study that from a downtown specific plan standpoint. And then finally, we assigned the purchase and sale agreement and negotiating rights between the city of Sunnyvale and Mid-Penn Housing to buy the old Wells Fargo Bank at the corner of Matilda and McKinley. And so, you know, there's certain amount of studies that need to go on as far as that's concerned. And so the city manager has that negotiating ability. You know, this is one of the things that we're always looking to purchase land, you know, having the city actually own land downtown so that we have kind of a vision of how that land is used in the long-term operation of our downtown, I think is really important. And so that was one of the things that I took to the city manager, wow, about 2 months ago now. And by the time city staff started talking to the real estate agent, Mid-Penn was already in negotiations and talking to the real estate agent. And so it was important that it's like, okay, it's better for us as opposed to just helping Mid-Penn build on that site. It's better for us to own that land and doing a long-term lease to Mid-Penn so that, you know, 40, 50 years from now, as the downtown continues to change and we figure out what the new buildings should look like, you know, and when it's time to rebuild, we have more of a say on what that actually looks like. So great from that standpoint to see, you know, that moving forward. And then last Wednesday evening, Assemblymember Evan Lowe held a District 26 town hall at Mission College to talk about legislation and just hear from constituents. So we had multiple council members from Santa Clara, from Sunnyvale, as well as Santa Clara there to hear, you know, to hear him, to talk to residents. And a lot of residents showed up and it was all ages, you know, young people. And I always love when young people step up and are able to speak, but they were there and just kind of give feedback on some of the state legislation and hear some, you know, talking to them afterwards and hearing some of their concerns about the city or what's happening at the state level. And then last Friday, Sunnyvale's Sunset movie series returned. So it's movies in the park around the city that happen, you know, so this year it's moving from park to park. So last week it was the first night and it was at Ortega Park in the south, and it was Minions: The Rise of Gru, a kids movie. I had never seen it and actually watched the majority of it and ended up watching the rest of it over the weekend. But it's actually pretty good, you know, that those continue tonight. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So it continues tonight at Columbia Park and then next week at Washington Park, but we'll get to that in a little bit. And then last Saturday, I started the day with the Silicon Valley Bike Coalition for a bike El Camino ride. And that was going from Santa Clara to Palo Alto. And so kind of looking at what the conditions are, stopping for ice cream at Pints of Joy on El Camino, one of my favorite new places that opened up last year. Good to seeing those businesses expand, but it was good. We had about 100 people in that bike caravan, so it was actually very safe from that standpoint. And you know, to take a look at what El Camino is. You know, Caltrans is looking to add additional bike lanes. There's already some bike lanes. Sunnyvale is one of the first cities to put bike lanes along El Camino. There's bike lanes from Fair Oaks to Remington, I think. And so from Fair Oaks Remington to I think Sunnyvale. Anyway, it was good to be out there and talk to people and meet a few new residents. So we had a good mixture of people from lots of different cities. And then midday on Saturday, Daruma Dojo on Murphy Avenue had their back to school party. So midday, and it was giving away school supplies, doing, you know, self-defense demonstrations, having food and music. So lots of funds for the kids as far as that's concerned. And then on Sunday, there was a biking buddies ride at Lakewood Park, and this was to learn bike skills. And so there were people there, young and old, to get better bike skills, have their bikes looked at from that standpoint. But it was put on by Silicon Valley Bike Coalition and Sunnyvale Community Services. So it was a social ride, but really good from that standpoint to see the kids out and trying to, give them best practices, having them understand how to be safe when you're going, crossing the street on your bike, when you're, when you're biking around, how to make sure that you're looking in the right directions, and just trying to make sure that everybody is safe, wearing your helmet, all the important things that you learn as you start learning to bike. And then on Sunday, Sunnyvale was named by Rent Cafe as the number 5th city to raise a family, and actually the number 1 in the quality of life. And so, Rent Cafe is an online service, but it looked at 130 cities across the US for the best places to live as a renting family. Plano, Texas was number 1. We were number 5, but I think, quality of life, which to me was very important. And then, of course, being number 5 nationwide is actually pretty positive. And then we've had, lots of comments on that, online from social media, people agreeing, disagreeing, but ultimately, it's the statistics, how they fluctuate, what things that they look at, what different studies end up prioritizing, which is always the interesting thing. But ultimately, being in the top 10 and being number 1 for quality of life, I think is important. It's like it's the amount of the parks that we have here, the general quality of life, the safety of the city. I think all those things really make a difference. And then on Monday, the California legislature returned for the final 5 weeks of their session. And so they basically have 5 weeks to finalize all their bills, and talking about the numbers, for the session so far, more than 1,700 assembly bills were introduced. Over 1,000 have been sent to the Senate, and nearly 90 have already gone to the Governor Newsom's desk. Of the 890 Senate bills introduced, about 660 have been passed to the Senate, and about 50 have made it to the governor. But there's still, I think, almost 400 assembly measures and about 300 Senate bills that go through the appropriations committees this week. And if they don't make it through appropriations, then they're moved to the suspense file, which may be, they might be revived next week, or they might be revived next year, or they, might just completely die. And, while it's really too late in this session to introduce entirely new legislation, there's that ongoing workaround that happens to the state legislature that I have a lot of problems with, of course, is the basically the gut and replace. So, but what they do is take an existing bill that isn't going anywhere, and they basically just delete all the wording in it and put something brand new in. And so it is, so it amends it as a completely different proposal. And, that's my biggest worry, is so some of those new bills wouldn't have any chance for review, any chance for amendments or alterations or advocacy for that standpoint. And so are quickly just approved and put on the governor's desk. And so, Governor Newsom also basically gave the legislators some kind of marching orders as far as his priorities of last minute legislation. So health reform, education, gun safety. So we'll see where those bills go at the end of the day, but it's, we have basically a month before everything's finalized, about the 3rd week of September. And then the governor has, I think, 30 days to sign that. So ultimately, we'll see where the state legislation goes. I'm sure there'll be a lot more news about the legislation over the next few weeks and the next month. Tuesday, of course, was Indian Independence Day, and I spent the morning on Murphy Avenue talking with Namrita Johanna, and she's a local radio host, but talking about our Indian community, talking about all the wonderful things happening in Sunnyvale, and my journey to be mayor. I actually got elected 7 years ago this week. So in a special election in mid-August of 2016. So that anniversary kind of came and went, but it's been interesting to be on council almost 7 years now. Next month it'll be 7 years, but it was good to celebrate, India's independence. Talk to her about what's happening in the Indian community, and it's that sense of patriotism, and there's lots of celebrations around the Bay Area over over the last week and this week to celebrate India Independence Day and commemorate that courage, that sacrifice that as patriots in India fought for India's freedom. So great to be there, and great, and I'm always thankful to be invited to so many celebrations around Sunnyvale, around the Bay Area for events like that, and celebrating the diversity that we have in our city. Tuesday evening this week, council met, and we interviewed, I think, 8 or 9 different applicants for our boards and commissions. So every quarter we have, a certain number of open positions on our boards as people either decide to resign because they're leaving the area, they got busy with their lives, or they're just term limited for whatever reason. We have 4-year term limits, and so it's trying to figure all that out. But we had a good crop of applicants for the several positions that are open. If you're ever interested in giving back to the city, that's one of the best things you can do, is basically join a board and commission and apply. And so applications are taken year round, and whenever there's a new position, the city clerk will then reach out to you and say, would you like to come in for interviews for that actual position. And then yesterday, I was actually met with representatives from Canyon Lake, California. And it's a small city. It's actually I think the nation's biggest gated community, but it's near Riverside. And they are looking to ultimately look at having a merged public safety model like we do. And so I was extolling the value of that from a city standpoint, from a cost standpoint, from a safety, from a safety standpoint, as well as just how our residents feel about our public safety model. And I think in general, it was one of the best things that happened back in 1950 when we went from a volunteer fire department to a paid police department to that merged model. I think it's served the city well, and ultimately we pay less per capita than any city in the Bay Area on public safety. So I think it's a great model, and whenever there's a downturn, whenever there are issues, cities come looking to see what they can do to save money, to reimagine. During Black Lives Matter, several cities talked to us about how to reimagine their public safety model. But as far as I know, no city has actually done it recently. And so I think, it was good to talk to the mayor and council member and city manager of Canyon Lake to talk about, how it's working well in our city, and whether or not they could implement it. So good to do that. And then last night, there was a West Nile virus mosquito spraying in Sunnyvale. So this is the second spraying in the last few weeks, and it's once West Nile virus mosquitoes have been found, it's better for them to basically go out, and that's what the county vector control does. And they've done San Jose, they've done several other cities over the last month. But whatever you can do to prevent standing water where mosquitoes can reproduce, it's really important from a city standpoint. As I said previously, I won't be covering weekly COVID numbers, unless things change dramatically. There's been multiple articles and news reports recently about the increase in COVID numbers. Hospitalizations are up, I think about 14% since last week. So we're starting to see an uptick And the majority of the monitoring that's being done, of course, is wastewater treatment plant monitoring of virus and in the amount of virus that they have, and which is the current variant and all that. But right now, not focusing on COVID. I continue to spend a lot of my time advocating on our city's behalf at the county level, at the state level. It's one of the most important things I can do, whether or not it's trying to get more state funding or talking to Caltrans, trying to get bike lanes on El Camino. So all those sorts of things, trying to make sure that we get our fair share from a Sunnyvale standpoint. Let me go ahead and announce some upcoming events. Still lots happening this summer, of course. Today, midday, there will be from 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. There will be a blood drive at the UFC gym on Wolf Road. And so this is in partnership with the Stanford Blood Center to host mobile units. So that will be happening. Yes, so that'll be happening today from 10 until 2:30. And if you want to give back, that's always a fantastic way. Giving blood, and is one of the easiest things you can do, since your body reproduces it and all that, to make sure that there's an ample blood supply out there. And then tonight, of course, there's the Sunset movie series continues. And so the games for kids start around 7 p.m. and then the movie starts right around 8 p.m. at sunset. So tonight is Top Gun Maverick at Columbia Park. And so that'll be starting around 8 p.m. Definitely, bring warm clothes, dress warmly, because with the weird weather, the overcast day that we have today might continue all day. We'll see if it ever warms up. And then, of course, next Friday, August 25th, is Light Year at Washington Park. And so definitely enjoy the fun movies, and especially as kids are going back to school, having a little celebration at the end of every week is always good. Tomorrow, there will be a repair cafe at the library, so at the main library on Olive. So it's a chance for you to, and I think that's happening from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., but it's a chance for you to bring your broken stuff, and so, your toasters, your blender, your lamp, and they will show you how to fix it and kind of walk you through that. If it's fixable, hopefully it is, but yeah, bring your items, and it's first come, first serve. So you don't need to register, you just need to show up. And then as far as upcoming council meetings, our next council meeting isn't until August 29th. We'll be appointing our new board and commissioners, and then we'll see an appeal for a decision made by the Planning Commission for 18 condominiums. Huh, it's one of those sorts of mornings. I haven't had my coffee yet. One of the 18 condos on the location on Crescent Avenue. So definitely, so we'll see where that goes. I haven't seen why it's being appealed, but we will get a staff report the Thursday before and find out more as far as that's concerned. Let's get to our weekly questions. Jesse asked, how much money was spent on marketing to get this rating of number 5? We all know what goes into getting ratings like this, and PR costs are huge. So Sunnyvale didn't pay anything, and not sure about, Plano, Texas or anything of that nature, but it's, Rent Cafe supposedly takes statistics for each of the cities and then figures out, and definitely in this case, figures out which statistics from each city that it's qualifying and how it ranks into what is number 1. So never sure about that. Always happy to see our name there, but it's nothing we pay for. But definitely, sometimes I have some of those same questions, but it's statistics at the end of the day. Lewis commented, we need a summary page of all the art box designs, much like you did for the Great Sunnyvale Food and Restaurant Tour. So I've started that. If you go to larryklein.com, you'll see a tab now called the Mayor's Art Project, and you'll at least see the maps for the Great Box Art Cover-Up Phase 1 and Phase 2. So we're currently in Phase 2 with 16 utility box art murals around the city. And so it gives basically the cross streets for each of those for phase 2. And then of course, phase 1, which happened about a year and a half ago, that map is also there for the 12 locations that are downtown. So at least you can see that, I'm trying to do basically a catalog of all the different locations and kind of a vision of what each of the art ended up as. So kind of what the cross streets are, what the addresses are, but we're getting there as far as that's concerned. Another question from earlier this morning. Chiat asked, Dear Mayor, as a resident, I believe the City Council is to promptly initiate a series of actions which encompasses the cleansing of our city streets, the eradication of homeless encampments, RV parks, rigorous enforcement of both municipal and state regulations, the revival of Sunnyvale's esteemed position as a symbol of urban excellence. As dedicated residents of Sunnyvale, we remain steadfast in our commitment to facilitating compassionate initiatives aimed at aiding those in vulnerable situations. Blah, blah, blah. Thank you. Sorry. Nevertheless, we are resolutely, well, long comment, resolutely in our conviction that the inadequate public policies must be discarded, while a renewed focus must be channeled into revitalizing the city that we deeply cherish. So this is one of the things that the council, cities all over the Bay Area are constantly dealing with. One of the things that we did, so over the last few years, we have had contracts with Home First to do community outreach to try to give, beds to the unhoused in our community. So shelter beds. And so, at least 10 unhoused residents have taken shelter beds over the last 2 years. We have a shelter in our community, although we have zero control of who is placed in that shelter. And that's one of the things I've been fighting with the county on. I do think that we should have a certain reserved number of beds at the shelter. We have a study issue that is coming back to us later this year about RV safe parking to deal with RVs and car parking, although there's at least one church in our community that's actually doing that. And then just last week, we hired an unhoused service manager. So council directed the city manager that this is a position that we needed to be added over the 20-year budget. So it basically gives a point of contact for the nonprofits, for working with the county, and working with concerned residents about dealing with the unhoused issues in our community. So definitely it's a topic that I take seriously, and ultimately from a city standpoint, we've been focusing more and more resources on over the last few years. And this is an issue that's especially California wide, looking at, especially I was in San Francisco last month and seeing how much of a problem it is there. Not that we don't have our challenges here, but at a much lesser amount, and working with Office of Supportive Housing to try to make sure that we can expand the number of shelter beds. It's like right now there's 100, one of the things that when I got on council, I worked with Supervisor Cortese to first make the shelter a year-round transitional shelter, and then expand the number of beds from 125 to 175 beds. Right now, there's 150 people at that shelter, although I know the capacity was basically, at least pre-COVID, made it viable for there to be 175 beds. So not really sure why we don't have that full capacity, but talking about unhoused issues was one of the critical things that I do a lot of advocacy on. Working, buying that piece of property at McKinley and Matilda so that we had add additional permanent housing. And in talking to Mid-Penn, they're looking at conceivably adding 120 units of permanently affordable housing at that location. So we'll see where that goes, but definitely that looking at unhoused issues is something that I spend a lot of time on as mayor. Rosie asked, "Hi Larry, we all love dance nights Wednesdays on Murphy Avenue. Can you do something to extend them longer into the year?" So I talked to Mike Johnson. the head of the Downtown Association. Just yesterday, we went out to lunch, and that's one of the things that I took to him. They're looking at, adding more events next year, as well as making that music longer in the summertime. And then, of course, working with lots of the different restaurants so that they bring music into their venue. So it's something that is already starting to happen, but those discussions are currently happening. George asked, the City Hall looks great. Is there a schedule for considering new facilities for the library? And so, yeah, that's one of the things that'll come back to council later in this year, beginning of next year, is whether or not we do renovation and an addition onto the existing main library, or we build a whole brand new library. So hearing, what residents want, and then looking at what the price tag is as far as that's concerned. Gina asked, when can I get a tour of the new City Hall? So you can give yourself a tour of the City Hall whenever you want. You can just go by from that standpoint. It's open, weekdays from 8:30 to 5. My best suggestion is take the elevator to the 4th floor and then walk down the lobbies, walk down the staircase. It's fantastic view. You can see the art that was commissioned per floor. But the other half of that is, which was really important, for the State of the City on Saturday, September 23rd. We will have tours of the City Hall and whatever grounds that are actually open. So definitely set aside that morning of Saturday, September 23rd to come to the State of the City as we honor, our board and commission members, our community award members, the Mayor's Award of Excellent winners, and of course, get a free tour of City Hall. There'll be art, there'll be music, there'll be other booths, so it should be good from that standpoint. I think that's all. George asked, the disaster in Maui is really tragic. Have you any suggestions for sending support donations to people on the island? So Red Cross, United Way are actually have been some of the main focus as far as getting aid and support to the people in Maui. But the other thing you can do is there's restaurants. I think Slice of New York has a donation effort that I think if you buy any pizza with pineapple on it, they're going to give a portion of the proceeds from that pizza to a restaurant Maui fund. So it's anything of that nature to support the people that have been hit by those fires in Maui, locally. And so there's lots of things from that standpoint. Anna asked, is there a map where you can find the artist? This looks like a potential bike ride. So yeah, so if you go to larryklein.com, you'll see that Mayor's Art Project tab on there. And I think that's it for the questions this week. Let me see if there's any final questions. Katie asked, is it law for bikelists to be licensed, registered in Sunnyvale? Is your bicycle license registered? So there is no law to basically register your bike, although there is kind of a national bike registration effort. And so some cities have been doing that. I've been talking to the city, the city chief or the chief of public safety about that. Because it's more for bike recovery as far as that's concerned. No, bikes don't need to be registered. You ride a bike or you buy a bike and you can ride it. So no, there is no registration requirements as far as bikes are concerned. Eric asked, Mayor Klein, last year you guided us by bike from Sunnyvale down to Day on the Bay in Alviso. Will you be doing it again this year? So yes, I'll be doing it again. It's Saturday, October 14th, and I was talking to Silicon Valley Bike Coalition last weekend, and they're already planning for that bike ride. So definitely, it's something that is a lot of fun, and it's just showing people that biking to Alviso is a possibility for everyone. So it's like you can get around, you can get through our community by biking. So it's like, biking Sunnyvale Avenue to Borregas to the Bay Trail and easily get to Alviso without too much effort is actually a lot of fun. And we had people there that had just last year that had just been biking for a few months, and we're very proud that that was going to be their longest bike ride. So yes, I will be back there again this year and happy to do it. Let's go ahead and wrap up. Thank you for joining me again this week. We live in interesting times and new issues come up almost every day, but I want you to know that no matter what challenges we face them together. You know, I'm proud of Sunnyvale and how residents have responded to the challenges over the last few years. You know, I'm just proud of everyone helping out in their community, you know, showing their kindness, showing their generosity, you know, giving away food and supplies, going out and, you know, making sure that their neighbors are okay. Because, you know, just showing their generosity, their kindness, you know, your actions and your attitude really do make a difference. Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We're in this together and we will get through this together. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend. Goodbye.